Okay, let's wait for maybe one more minute and then we'll start. Hello, everyone. Good evening from where I am, and good morning to most of you. Welcome to panel 5 of the webinar series Indigenous Peoples, Heritage and Landscape in the Asia Pacific, Knowledge Co-Production, Policy Change, and Empowerment. Before we start, we wish to acknowledge that as a land grant institution, the Department of Anthropology, Center for Southeast Asian Studies, and Asia Pacific Center at UCLA acknowledges the Gabrielino Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of Tovangar, the Los Angeles Basin, and Southern Channel Islands. This webinar series is supported by the Wenner-Gren Foundation for Anthropological Research, the Henry Luce Foundation, the New England University First Peoples Rights Center, the National Chenji University Center for Taiwan, Philippines Indigenous Knowledge, Local Knowledge, and Sustainable Studies, or CITIPILS, the UCLA Institute of Archaeology, and the UCLA Asia Pacific Center, the UCLA Department of Anthropology, UCLA Center for Southeast Asian Studies, University of Hawaii at Manoa Center for Southeast Asian Studies, Ifugao State University, the Partido State University, and the Save the Ifugao Terrorists Movement are co-hosts of the webinar series. Panel 5 is titled History and Heritage, and this is uh, um, uh, something that's close to what I do. So I'm excited to introduce the panel, or rather the panel itself, and my co-convener of this webinar series, Professor Dawei Kwan, will introduce the panelists in a few minutes. Archaeological practice and heritage conservation in Southeast Asia have recently shifted to active engagement with local stakeholders. This is due to the realization that involving communities results in meaningful research outcomes. A growing number of investigations are actively seeking the involvement of communities as both contributors and as active and involved research participants. These undertakings humanize our community partners and counter the exclusivity often associated with scholarly authority. An increasing number of scholars approach research as interdisciplinary, cross nations, cross ethnics, emphasizing that we no longer work alone. This webinar series provides examples of this trend. It is predicated on the concepts of practice and agency and their impacts on cultural heritage in Southeast Asia. Panels in the series focus on communities drastically transformed by colonialism. We hope it will illustrate how archaeological and heritage scholars can empower indigenous and descendant communities through heritage conservation. We focus on the concept of cultural heritage here since it encompasses and transcends disciplinary boundaries. It also has its origin in Western scholarship and thus has colonial connotation in post-colonial Southeast Asia. It is also important in identity formation, nation building, and empowerment. Although there is no all-encompassing definition that catches its magnitude, heritage unifies an interdisciplinary study and practice that focuses on the perceived importance of cultural or historical phenomena. Heritage is an intangible process replete with cultural and social values. In other words, heritage goes through a process of negotiation based on each community's experience. Therefore, it becomes important to those who have a shared history, experience, and memory. Intrinsic in the concept of heritage is the idea of community. There can be no heritage if there is no group composed of multiple individuals who own history or a building or an artifact. Heritage has different levels of meaning to different groups, and it is also a cultural product. In the social sciences, the term heritage invokes a relationship with the past. It also provides a paradigm to link present day identities to historical narratives. As such, the term becomes a powerful political tool that can be used for either inclusivity or exclusivity in nation building. Indeed, heritage has been used to call for unity among peoples with similar historical experiences. In Southeast Asia, deep pre-contact and long colonial histories provide an interesting case study for cultural heritage. The clash between the romanticized pre-European contact and the glorification of the colonial experience is evident in how heritage is understood by descendant communities. In this panel, we forefront examples from Southeast Asia where heritage conservation and management involved community inputs. Works by colleagues in Indonesia, Cambodia, Bali, Indonesia, and Thailand underscores the importance of involving communities in heritage issues. Our panelists will be introduced by Professor Dawai Kwan. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. It's my honor to introduce you, our panelist and moderator today. Our first panelist is Peter Leb. Peter is an archaeologist specializing in the history of social change in island Southeast Asia over the last 4,000 years. His research focuses on island landscape and seascape, cross-cultural interactions such as trade and warfare, human environment dynamic, and climate change. He has conducted collaborative fieldwork in Indonesia, Timor-Leste, and the Philippines. He also has an interest in archaeological practice, museum and heritage management in the Southeast Asia and the US, and has ongoing collaboration with Native American tribe in the Pacific Northwest of the US. Our second panelist is Sean Baptiste Chabon. Sean obtained a master's degree from the University of Sorbonne in 2005, followed by a PhD on Khmer archaeology in 2011, both focusing on non-Kowloon archaeological sites. Simultaneously, he worked for various institutes in Cambodia, including the Cambodian Apsara National Authority. In 2007, he founded and has continued to direct the Archaeology and Development Foundation. For the last 12 years, he has conducted many archaeological studies in non-Kowloon together with the ADF team, which has had a significant impact on the present knowledge of the Angkor region and more generally of the Khmer Empire. Our third panelist is Wiwi Dlamiasi. Wiwi is the lecturer at the Department of International Relations, Faculty of Social and Political Science, University Udayana in Bali, Indonesia. Her research focused on some key themes in contemporary international relations, such as the political geography, conflict transformation, and community-based natural resources management. She provides social and legal analysis for the UNESCO World Heritage Site nomination of Balinese irrigation system, Suba. She was involved in the establishment of a coordination and communication forum among Bekasi, the Suba head, in the management area of Suba landscape. He also helped design the monitoring and evaluation system of the management process of the cultural landscape of Bali province under the Subox Research Center of University Udayana. She is currently actively in supporting community participation and youth involvement in the management system of the cultural landscape. Our fourth panelist is Rasami Chusonde. Rasami is an associate professor of archaeology and a former chair of the Department of Archaeology, Faculty of Archaeology, Bangkok, Thailand. At present, she is a director of graduate program in archaeology. Rasami's area of interest include late to post limestones and foragers in the tropic, Southeast Asia, prehistory, cave archaeology and ethnic education, the destruction of archaeology of heritage, art and archaeology and context of archaeology in plural societies. Rasam is actively involved in archaeological development and active in Thailand, Southeast Asia. She has been an expert member of international committees on archaeological heritage management and advisory board of world archaeology, Asian archaeology, and many important journals. Apart from professional service, she has also been intensively worked with the local tribal community and Thai, as well as Southeast Asia general publics on sustainable heritage protection and archaeological education. Our moderator today is Grace Barreto Tesoro. Grace is professor at the Archaeological Study Program, University of the Philippines. Her research interests include mortuary practice, status, identity, cosmology, and historical archaeology. She was the editor of the ASP Journal from 1998 to 2016. She is a member of the Society of Philippine Archaeologists from 1999. She assists the National Museum in deliberating significant cultural properties since 2015. She is part of the SPAFA Journal editorial board. She is also a member of the Institute of Southeast Asia Archaeology Early Career Award Committee. Her current project include following persons finding a historic Pananthropical Anthropocene headed by Dr. Patrick Roberts of the Max Planck Institute, investigating value and ethics regarding the death in past and contemporary societies and past cosmology. She edited the book Exploring Philippine Cemetery, published in 2016. So we have very outstanding panelists, moderators, and very interesting topic today. I would like to welcome all our participants and begin our discussion. So Grace, you can take over here.
All right. Good day to everyone. Good evening, good morning to wherever you are in this part of the world. And to start now, we will call each panel member to introduce their work and their activities in their respective geographical areas. So let's start with Rasmi. Rasmi, you are on mute.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
Thank you so much, Grace, and thank you, Stephen, and also Professor Davies to introduce me for this panel. And so I would like to start with how I, engage my community work. Or let me share you the slide. Um, okay. My so the sharing is will be the case study that I work in the highland Bamapa, Meongson province, northwestern Thailand. And the area that I work is near the border between Thailand and Myanmar. So it's composed of the tribal ethnic group, at least 7 groups, which is making it more complicated to work in this area if you don't know the local to really kind of run your project. So what the case that I work with and I engage the community is I think it's a lifetime learning process. So I start in 1998, and throughout that time until now, I still kind of like changing my approach to work with the community all the time because the situation also changed by the policy of the government and the global, impact on the local. So my work that, I engage the community, uh, it needs a long-term kind of like, trust from the people. So, and I work here for over 20 years, and I, I use the at the beginning of my work. Let me show you that the area is here is the border between Thailand and Myanmar. Let me first, introduce you that the majority of the Thai, in people, ethnic group in Thailand are Thai. So the minority here living in the highland area. So the sense of the heritage, the heritage in Thailand, the government used the term like Thai heritage. So it means that, it's more likely to be like classical archaeology and also the general kind of like classical uh, like temple or uh, historical park, like in Sukhothai or Ayutthaya, those kind of like general sense in terms of Thai heritage. But when working with this and try to introduce the term like heritage, it is slightly different from, the one in central Thailand or the one that promoted by the state authority. So, and this is the group that living in this area. 20 years ago, it's quite difficult to work in this area, and you need a translator to help you to communicate with people, or at least you have to be able to speak the northern dialect so you can communicate with people. But, like at the beginning, we have the interpreter communicate with people.
Hello, Rasmi.
And introduce them about our work. Okay, I just gonna stop here that after that, when I work since 1990, every project that I work, there, I always include the management kind of like process in our work to engage the community in there. So that is how I engage the people, the community in my work. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, this is nice. The last slide you showed, Rasmi. I think we can come back to that later.
Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
it's a good slide. All right.
Thank you.
So may I now call on Peter Lay to discuss how he engages with the community in Indonesia.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Peter, and I want to thank the session organizers for this whole webinar series. I've been following along every one and really enjoyed them so far, and particularly looking forward to today's because we have some archaeologists involved. So I'm going to share some slides here by way of introduction. So I'm speaking to you from inside this building here, which is on the University of Washington campus. It's dark, but my approach to community engaged scholarship is colored by my job, and I have a kind of strange job. I'm split between two institutions at our campus. One of them is here in this building where I'm a professor in the anthropology department. And so this is probably more typical of a American academic, and this is where I do my archaeological research in Southeast Asia, and I also teach college classes. So here I am doing a project in Eastern Indonesia, and many of those projects have involved community aspects or community programs. I often work with kids, so high school age or even younger kids. I found that, and I'll talk about this a little later, I found it to be a very easy way to get access to a community and through the school systems. So the other part of my job is in a museum. So this is our new museum. It's just built this year, a new building, the Burke Museum. It's a natural history and culture museum. So it has collections of archaeological stuff as well as birds and mammals and plants and dinosaurs and all that kind of stuff. So in this part of my job, I actually work mostly here in Washington State where I live, and primarily with Native American communities in this area, so the indigenous people of Washington. And it's through, I don't do excavations here, I work with collections in the museum. So we do public programs, we do a lot of repatriation work where collections or objects are returned to traditional owners. And lately I've been doing a lot of work with what my colleague Sven Hawkinson calls knowledge repatriation. So it's actually putting archaeological artifacts or objects back into a cultural context and with communities. And I found that some of my most rewarding jobs. So for example, up on the upper left of the screen is a boat, a canoe, a wooden dugout canoe. We have an ancient canoe in our collections that was found in the 1960s. And last year, I worked with a traditional canoe carver to make a replica of that canoe. And then we actually did a voyage in the canoe down the river where it was found with tribal members from Muckleshoot, who are a tribe in this area. And I've also done some landscape work. So this on the lower part of the screen is a map of Seattle, the city of Seattle, about 1850. So before non-native people moved to this area, and it has a Coast Salish landscape terms. It shows the landforms before they were transformed by colonial industrial activity as a way of interpreting this place where we live. And occasionally these two parts of my jobs do come together. This is one example from the Philippines where we brought together a village in Palawan Island called Sibaltan together with a tribe in the Northwest, the Suquamish tribe that's quite near Seattle. Both of these communities had similar challenges. They were traditionally fishing communities where fishing was starting to die out. They were encountering a lot of mass tourism and young people moving away from the community. So the two groups had a lot to share with each other about the role of heritage. And we're sitting here in front of a museum that the Sibaltan village built. It's a traditional house of this area, Kuyuan house. So we were just sort of, my job was more to bring these people together rather than to direct the program. So a really rewarding thing. So that's, I think we'll get into the panel, some of the more details of my project. I'll stop sharing the screen here.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to grappling with some of the questions I see coming at us and having discussion with my fellow panelists. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Let's now go to Wiwik, again from Indonesia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wiwik. Thanks so much for having me here and for the kind introduction. I'm going to share my presentations. Hope you can see it. So I'm going to talk about my work at Subox Jatiluwi. That's one of the Subox inscribed as World Heritage Site in Bali. To give you a little brief introductions on the site, Subox Jatiluwi is located in the sea area on the map. It is one of the largest clusters within the cultural landscape in Bali. It was inscribed in 2012 by UNESCO, and it represents the Trihita Karana philosophy, a traditional Balinese belief. So this is the area of Subox Jatiluwi. Subox System is a traditional irrigation in agricultural life in Bali. It has mountains and forests as the water supply, water catchment areas, and they have rice fields, rice terraces, village where the farmers live. And then they have networks of water-related temples. That's how they kind of like organize their agricultural system. And also ceremonies that related to the Subox activities. So the Subox system was acknowledged as a UNESCO World Heritage Site because it shows this philosophy that if you want to have a prosperity or happiness, you have to balance your relationship as a human being to the environment, and then to the spiritual realms, and then also among each other. So this is the lookout from Subox Jatiluwih. It's located in Tabanan district, and it is one among 20 Subox that's located in the area. And then it is also the most visited Subox in that area. The reason we did our research with photo voice methodology last year here, because there is a land, I would say, extreme land changes in the area. And then I work at the university at the Subox Research Center as well. And we were approached by the community farmers that work with us during the inscription of the World Heritage Site, and also with the young people that came from the area that kind of like question what is happening to our area now that it is UNESCO World Heritage. It should be protected, but now there's this massive land conversion. And as you can see from the photo, which is taken by one of our participants, how a farmer in 2015 converted his productive rice field into a restaurant. And ever since this development, there are then mushrooming effect from other farmers to build also like tourism facilities in a larger or smaller scale. And this is when I did the work with the community during the inscriptions of the Subox System as a World Heritage Site. As you can see, I mostly work with male or men. You see the representative of government agencies and also representative of the community, which are mostly men. And it's kind of like interesting when the conflict happened and the community came to us, it kind of like struck me that we never actually talk or engage ourselves with the other part of the community, like young people or the women within the Subox community. So we had this idea to do research together with Photo Voice International, how we can engage local people in Subox Jatiluwih to get their perspective about the Subox, how they want to manage the Subox, how they view the Subox in the future. This is one of our activities. It lasted for about 6 months. The participants took photos, and then they presented, they're telling story about why they take that photo, and then they kind of like discuss the agreed themes that they want to show, they want to share. And we're currently on the final stage of our research project, where the participant will exhibit and present their story through their photos that they're taking. And this is one example of trials exhibitions that they did with a student from the Maryland University. And before we have a bigger exhibitions where the participant wanted to show and present their perspective through their photos to a government agency, particularly UNESCO representative, and kind of like to express their concern of the management of the World Heritage Site, particularly in Subox Jatiluwih. So that's all, a little introduction about the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Wiwik. And now let's go to JB.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Jean-Baptiste. Usually we call me JB Chevance. I'm an archaeologist working in Cambodia for the last 21 years now, specialized in the Khmer Empire. I'm just going to share a few slides with you to introduce our project here. So I hope you see that.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So our project is basically focusing in Kulen area, which is a few kilometers, 30 kilometers north east of Angkor. As you can see on the map, this is the, sorry about that, I didn't put any location about Cambodia, but I guess we all know where it is in Southeast Asia. The Angkor Park is, of course, was attracting most of the research attention for the last century, but nobody really worked on this mountain, which is the Kulen mountain, the Lechi mountain, literally 30 kilometers northeast of Angkor. And my attention was triggered 20 years ago when I arrived in Cambodia to explore those sites and to see what was there, and also to realize that the communities, the villagers up there, were very much isolated and in a harsh situation. So basically the idea was that there was a very rich archaeological heritage and a population which was struggling. So it's also a very special site because it's the only major geological feature in Angkor region. As you might know, Angkor is the flat landscape, and on the north of Angkor you can see this important mountain range raising up to almost 500 meters. It's a plateau with several villages, about 10 villages, 4,600 people at the moment. And as I said, numerous archaeological sites, most of them corresponding to the city of Jayavarman II from the late 8th century, early 9th century AD. The forest cover has been very important until recently, and has been also very much damaged recently by deforestation. So that's also one of the aspects that I will highlight maybe later. Also the importance of Kulen Mountain is the fact that it's at the birth of every rivers and stream in the Angkor region. So basically the moats of Angkor temples, the reservoir of Angkor temples, are all filled up by streams and rivers that are coming from the Phnom Kulen area. So my idea when I first came there was to firstly survey the archaeological site, try to catch up with the knowledge that was previously done by the French researcher from the late 19th century all the way to 1930s, 1960s. Of course, nothing was done during the war, which has had a lot of consequences on the recent history of Cambodia and the situation and the knowledge of archaeological sites for the people, the communities, and the young scholars. But the idea was also to set up a project which was with a global approach, not only focusing on the archaeological problematic, demining first because Kulen was a stronghold of the Khmer Rouge, but also mapping, excavation, conservation, training, but also to try to address the issues that the villagers are facing, not only in terms of health, but education, environmental, agriculture, and so on. So the whole project took a few years to be designed and carefully thought. And then in 2007, I set up the Archaeology and Development Foundation, which is a British charity, also an international NGO recognized in Cambodia. And our main partner are the Apsara Authority, in charge of Angkor sites, but also the Ministry of Environment in charge of the Phnom Kulen National Park. So we have been running this project for the last 12 years now, with a lot of activity involving the villagers in many ways, not only archaeological research and conservation, but also development activities, as I said previously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, JB. I'd like to ask Rasmi. Rasmi, when I first met you years ago, you've been already working with the community. Can you tell our participants, our attendees, when and how did you realize that you should engage or include the community in your research?
I think that almost at the beginning of the research project, because my research project is interdisciplinary, and I have different scientists that work with me, and we have an incident that one of our colleagues collect the sample without asking the community. So it's a big thing for the community, and we have a meeting, and then since then, from the beginning of the project, even though we kind of aware of this issue, I start to really talking to the people, every village that we did survey. So it's not just one village, but the whole district that you have to go to the every village. So that what happened to me. And then, every time that I work, I involve people, community at the beginning of my project, not just like after or in between, but at the beginning of the project,
How
and
do
make a
you
this.
approach them?
I just have to like ask them for the meeting. They have a regular meeting in the village, once a month. So when I know that when they're gonna have the whole village, like hundred of people, they gather for the meeting, I ask their permission that can I go there and talk to them and tell them that who we are. I introduce all my research team and tell them that what I am doing. And in fact, I mean, normally if you get the permission from the fine art department or the forestry department and the governor, you can work without asking the permission from the community. But I think that it's important to ask them a permission. So I did that,
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
community was receptive at the very
Yeah.
beginning.
No, they ask a lot of questions because the most difficult thing is they're afraid of the spirit. I think that throughout Southeast Asia is the same thing. They believe that when we disturb the archaeological site, we disturb the spirit. So that is, I couldn't get in some case, I couldn't get the permission right away. So I have to do the community involvement. I talked to a lot of senior, elder, and talk to the leader, not just the, all community, but all, we work very hard to talk to them and explain to them that what we are doing. Yeah.
Thank you, Rasmi. I want to ask Peter if he had similar experience in Indonesia. Um, so again, how and when did you realize that you should work with the or engage the community, and any challenges that you face, considering that you are an international archaeologist? Because Rasmi, as a Thai, already faced challenges with her fellow Thai countrymen. Perhaps you had a different or similar experience, Peter, in Indonesia.
Yeah, well, so to start, when I was a graduate student, I had a field school in California, and the teacher of the field school actually had a community engagement aspect. And I was lucky to be the student that kind of worked on that side of it. So from my beginnings of my training, I think I really enjoyed that part of it. So when I went to Indonesia in the late 1990s to do my dissertation project, I brought that idea with me, thinking I would want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I found it's completely different, in so many ways. And I was faced with a whole new set of challenges. Like Rasmi said, I think what working with Native Americans in the United States, you begin from a very negative point where most Native people have a very bad experience with archaeology and archaeologists for decades or centuries, really. So your work as an archaeologist is to work against that and to work with people to get past that very negative attitude. And I didn't find that in the places I worked in Indonesia. In fact, people really didn't have any opinion of archaeology or any past experience with it, which was good in some ways, but in other ways they had also no idea what I was doing. So there's a lot of explaining about what my goals were. And I also faced language challenges as I was learning Bahasa Indonesia, but I wasn't very good at it. I still am not great at it. And like you mentioned, I had permission from the national government to do my work, but I had no guidance about who else to ask. And so I struggled a lot to find the right people to talk to. And I found in the late 90s, the government in Indonesia it's very different now, I think, with the rise of democracy and decentralization in Indonesia. But at that point, it was still a dictatorship. and the government relationship with people was very different. So I had to kind of work around the government. And that's where as I mentioned earlier, I found schools were a good place to do that. It wasn't apolitical, but it avoided some of the problems of working with government officials in Indonesia at the time. Now it's very different. I find, at least at the local level, government is much more democratic and trusted by people. So it's a different scene these days. But I made so many mistakes and ran into trouble, and a lot of it was misunderstanding and the wrong kind of approach. I still make mistakes now, and really the biggest one, the biggest one was I think dedicating enough time to the community aspect is challenging when you're a academic. It's not necessarily rewarded in our system. I think that's changing, but and also the kind of the unknowns. Like I had a similar experience as Rasmi, where I asked for local permission to excavate. People were very worried about the spirits, and they said no, and I said okay, and moved on. But I didn't have time. I didn't give time to figure out what was going on, because I felt rushed to dig the, finish my research. And that's often been a problem for me, finding the right amount of time to do this, especially as a foreigner, when my visa is limited. I can only be there for 2 months or something, and I have to leave, and it's expensive to fly back and forth. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, we'll go back. Well, you mentioned that you made mistakes and you're learning from these mistakes. We'll get back to that later, and when we discuss best practices. Thank you, Peter, for your answer. Wiwik, you mentioned that you mostly work with the males in the society, in the community.
Yeah.
What challenges, I know so what are the challenges that you face as an academic, as a female academic?
Well, I must say first, my background was international relations, and the Subox is a traditional agricultural system in Bali. So when I first joined in, I was doing research on water issues in Bali, where I met Professor Stephen Lansing, and he was doing all this nomination dossier for the Subox system. And a lot of question that I received was like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, okay, we're just trying to make the Subox system to be protected. And my answer, hopefully, will also answer. I saw the Q&A from one person, Saiful Bakri, that asked, what is this all about? At the beginning, we wanted to protect the Subox system because Bali is a very popular tourism destination. So every area now is trying to develop tourism facilities. I'm talking about before the pandemic happened. And Subox system facing this threat of losing their landscape. They're about 700, 1,000 hectares per year lost due to development. So the idea of making it a World Heritage Site would be just like, protecting the system and also protecting the landscape. And I know for a lot of people, it's kind of like, are you sure you want to make a World Heritage Site? Because it's like two sides of a coin, right? You wanted to protect the landscape, but also at the same time, you're inviting more people to visit the World Heritage Site. So it's kind of like, a tough decision. So the challenge at first for me, because I'm from a different background, but as a Balinese, I feel like I know the system. I grew up around my area. I grew up, my house was surrounded by rice field, and then I saw how it changes when the road was developed, and then a lot of land conversion happening afterward. So it's a learning experience for me. And it's also interesting because during all the process of nomination, even after it was inscribed, I met only with government agencies and community representatives. And the Subox system, mostly they're led by male farmers, because the work is kind of like difficult. They have to check on the water system from the forest and then up to all their member rice fields. So it's always with men. And one of the photos that I show in my presentation, where we're doing mapping for the Subox landscape, it's part of after it was being inscribed. part of the protection effort, it is all male. So when the conflict happened in 2015, and then I have the farmers coming in, it made me realize when they say somebody in our member community changed their landscape into a tourism development. And then after that, another young people came to us and said, like, I saw my dad coming to the university, and I mean, he's a farmer. What is he doing in the university? So it kind of like, it builds up this question. And like Peter said, we made mistake. It's a learning process. That's when I kind of like realized, oh my God, this is just like the thing that we kind of like miss. We didn't hear other voices from other people in the community, because all this time we're just working with representative from government agencies or from the community. So, and one of the biggest challenge for me was like, because I'm not from agriculture, so I'm also learning new things about the Subox system. All my knowledge are based on like literature review or talking to my parents and families and friends, but not really coming to the community and kind of like have a discussion with them.
But does the UNESCO recognition help?
Well, we're hoping that it helps, but like, again, like I mentioned, when it was inscribed as UNESCO World Heritage Site, we're expecting that there's a protection effort to the landscape. And the government did establish a governing assembly to manage the landscape. But again, community, like Stefan mentioned earlier when he introduced the panel, community it's not the same person. They consist of different people with different interests. So this dynamic system that we need to capture, because now the community are divided in the landscape, those who want to protect and preserve the Subox landscape, and those who wants to capture the opportunity to develop tourism facilities to increase their economic benefits.
As a scholar, how do you address that concern?
At the moment, what we're doing is we have this research project with Photo Voice International, and we want to kind of like capture the perspective from other people in the community, like women, we rarely hear their voices, or young people, because I think one of the challenges for agricultural system, not only in Bali, but also around the world, is who is going to do farming later. A lot of the children of these farmers already work in the tourism industry, tourism sectors, in other part of the island. So I think what we're doing as a scholar is just continuously engage ourselves with this community and ask their perspective. And because, like I mentioned, it's a changing system, and there's a lot of people in it with a lot of different interests. So as best what we can do is just trying to give them a platform how they can voice their concern and their challenges.
Okay. Thank you, Wiwi.
Thank you.
JB, many international archaeologists have been working in Cambodia for a long time, decades.
Yes.
How do you think the colonial experiences help or perhaps serve as an obstacle, hamper your work on heritage conservation?
So yeah, to summarize quickly the situation, we have been inheriting a situation where basically it's 100 years of French scholar, no, from the late or almost mid 19th centuries, let's say 1860, the first explorers prior to colonization, and then systematic exploration of archaeological sites at the late 19th century. Then EFO, the École Française d'Extrême-Orient, was the real institution, the most important institution, the only institution actually working in Southeast Asia at that time under the French colonialism period. So this institution was really producing a lot of material which was only in French, as far as I know, for the Cambodian archive. And this remains until the independence in 1953. So after the independence, there was a bit of a shift with the setting up of the Royal University of Fine Art in Phnom Penh, which was done in 1965. Unfortunately, there was only one generation of archaeologists who were able to graduate it, because in 1970, civil war, then decades of horror for Cambodia. So we have a situation where we had knowledge produced by French researcher, anthropologist, archaeologist, art historian, linguist, and then this all came up with the brutal end in 1970, who actually stopped for 25 years. It only came back in the 90s with this time a different approach. Multicultural, not only French-based publication. So this whole context has gives a very special pattern. So for us, the challenge is really to assimilate that knowledge from our predecessors and to trying to transmit to the younger generation. Now the difficulty is that they do not always speak French. So we have to kind of play between languages. The level of education when we talk about communities is obviously a challenge, because as in my case in Kulen Mountain, obviously the villagers have and please, I don't want to be rude at all, but the level of education is quite low. On the other hand, they have a knowledge, and this is what is also very interesting for us. So it's obviously difficult to transmit the archaeological knowledge right away like this. You have to digest information and then trying to transmit through different channels. But they have a knowledge which is very useful for us as archaeologists, and also for the knowledge in general of the region. So I think the real key is to exchange between the local community about their knowledge. It could be the topography, it could be the anthropological approach, their own belief, and this has to be particularly taken in consideration when you do archaeology research in Cambodia. For example, you have to do a ceremony before any excavation, which I think it's the same in most of Southeast Asia, yes. But this is really important. But they do have a knowledge which is bringing information to us. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but basically it's all a matter of exchanging with as much as you can. And for my case, it is still challenging, as Peter mentioned, because we are not from the area where we work, even though we try to speak the language. Also, yes, integrating as much as you can young scholars and students. That was one of our objectives, to welcome as much as we can young archaeologists, graduated or not even graduated from Penn, and give them an opportunity to have field experience and post-excavation experience, so they can learn what is an archaeological site and how do you approach the whole problematic on the global scale, on the smaller scale, and how do you treat the archaeological artifacts, and how do you share this knowledge after. So it's all about exchanging, and it's also all about taking a lot of time. That's why I think one of the key aspect is to spend time. It's just not something you can do in a couple of campaigns. It takes years.
Okay, thank you, JB. Good. Peter, you mentioned that when you the first time you went to Indonesia, that the political system was not stable, or that, am I correct?
Well, it was stable. It was a dictatorship for 25 years. It was pretty stable, but it collapsed while I was there, 1998.
So how do you think engaging the community facilitate healing in post-conflict settings? And how does community engagement impact the community itself and empowers them?
Yeah, so I've worked in two places that were immediately post-conflict. So in Maluku in Eastern Indonesia, in the early 2000s, there was a fairly major violent conflict, ostensibly between Muslims and Christians, but there was a lot of different fault lines. And I actually couldn't go there and work for several years. The government closed it to any outside researchers. So during that time, I had a grant, actually. I had to switch my area to Timor-Leste, or East Timor, which funnily enough had just emerged from a violent conflict after declaring independence from Indonesia in 1999. So I started working there in 2002. It was still under UN administration. And it was immediately clear when you land at the airport with UN, those white cars that UN people drive, and a lot of guns, and basically the whole country was destroyed. So people were living, all the schools, all the power plants, all the hospitals were destroyed. So it was I had this research idea that I wanted to do there, and immediately kind of warfare became the thing that I had to do because it was all around me. So I started a project actually studying kind of the history of warfare in East Timor. So the community work there was, I think my work was very minor. This was a very traumatized population. A lot of people died. It was it's very fresh in people's mind. And I think thinking back, this is, I think, a place I wish I could do it over again because I just didn't understand the level of trauma. I had never experienced warfare myself like that. And I would change it up. So regardless, in 2007, I was finally able to go back to Maluku. The conflict had basically ended. There was still a little bit going on. And I took the lessons I learned from Timor to Maluku. And I also knew Maluku a little bit better. I had, a lot of close friends there, and I kept in touch with them through the conflict period. What I found is that archaeology, because our evidence it's not usually fine-grained enough to see like ethnic differences or religious differences between people. It's kind of a good place to look at people's shared heritage as a way to kind of move beyond conflict. So what I found actually is my archaeological project, and I was collaborating with folks from Maluku, including someone who I was hoping was going to join us today, but couldn't in the end, Marlon Ririmasi, who was from Ambon, from the city there. What we found is our project was kind of hijacked by people there as a peace spreading project. Like there's newspaper articles about our project that talked about, these archaeologists are finding evidence of before we were Muslims and Christians, but we were all the same religion, and we shared this brotherhood basically 3,000 years ago. So we kind of rolled with that, that worked, and that became also our message. It wasn't the only message, but people were really, there's so much emphasis there on kind of religious history, like the history of Islam, the history of Christianity. And when I asked like school kids about history, they would always refer back to this history of Islam. And to have a different story to tell that was separate from this kind of religious story, which was a source of the conflict, was, I think, very healing. And we ended up doing eventually some kind of like mini exhibits, and we did a radio call-in show and kind of different public programs that use that as kind of a starting point. So that's one example. I think, just in general, being able to reflect on history can be healing, but also having something new to talk about, something kind of new evidence. We're always discovering these new things when we're excavating. that provides a new place for people to get along with each other. And I think that can be productive.
I think so. Pete, based on Peter's answers, that politics and archaeology, if not all the most of the times, are intertwined. Rasmi, in Thailand, how do you make archaeology, or do you make archaeology apolitical, or are nationalist approaches in archaeology appropriate? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I am. Thank
Okay.
you for the question. I think that for me, I think that archaeology is a politic,
Mhm.
but I aware that the situation or the context in Thailand, archaeology is also used. The use of archaeology is used as a nationalist kind of like, uh, propaganda as well, because of archaeology, or the what we can see is in the curriculum, in the textbook, and also even in the tourist kind of like destination. So you can see the propaganda of the state that use the history, like capital city like Sukhothai or Ayutthaya as a kind of like the major world heritage as well. So it show the great sense of the Thai, these two are the ancient capital of Thailand. So it still exists in the like Thai society, that the use of nationalistic. And but as for me, as an archaeologist and in academic, I think that I I would take the side of a politic for the use of archaeology. But even in the community work, I take this side, but I aware that the local community also use us as a like economic kind of like development. Like Vivid say that we have a divide as well. One group of the people want to conserve, especially the senior, group, but the headman and or the local administrator want to promote the tourist you know economy within the village. So we have to accept that our part of archaeology, the site, will be used for that kind of purpose. So the politics that we talk about is the national politics, the local politics, and the community politics, that we see within our society. Yeah.
And how do you safely navigate through all of this politics?
Well, the thing is, I learned it, like Peter, uh, JB, and also Vivek, that at the beginning, of my work, I don't know, what to do. But throughout the process, I am learning that we have to take we start to do the oral or local history. We have a colleague, the historian, work with us, and also anthropologists that work with us. I used to do everything by myself. I do that, talk to the people. But later on, I think that, no, you cannot do that. You know, we don't have time. I mean, we teaching full time and also do research. So we have when we set the new project, we have a historian and also anthropologist who work with the community, work with and once we study the local history, we can talk to them, more. And the connection with the community, I think that we have more good kind of like a relation, and we understand that what is politics within the village, within the village, who is who, so we can negotiate with them as well. And in terms of the larger picture, we all know that, in the Thai society, when you work in the archaeology society, you have to talk to whom? You have to talk to the governor, you have to talk to the local administrator, you have to talk. That is that order we know, the structure of the power we know. But within the village, sometimes you don't know. You have to make sure that you understand the what size of the people, and so you can really hear all of the voice you have to make sure that you in the kind of like you fair for every group, when you work on that. So we just kind of like learning by doing and make a lot of mistake as well. Like Peter and JB, I make a lot of mistake, but I'm learning, and every time that we make a mistake, I never let it last for a long time. I would talk to the people, I confront them and apologize, or try to explain to them. So that's why we have a long-term kind of relationship and good relationship with the people after all. And the whole team also, before we go to the field, all of the research team will have to understand the situation. And that is the way that we are doing. Yeah. And we know that's why we kind of learn who is who, and we deal with the different power, you know, in the village. Yeah.
Thank you, Rafi. You mentioned power.
Yeah,
I want to
power.
ask you, yeah, I want to ask Wiwik, how does community engagement impact and empower the community that you're working with?
So the research project that we're doing with Photo Voice has a very interesting aspect. We give camera to the participant and ask them to take photos and then tell stories why they take that photos. And then during the discussion, we kind of agree on the next team they're going to engage more in their next, taking photos. So we have a various age range of participants. We have the eldest woman who's like 70 years old, and we have a young boy who's like, I think late teens, 17 years old, 8 to 17, 18 years old. And it's kind of like interesting when we first introduce this project and we give them cameras, they start taking photos of the thing that they like. And this is the first thing that we noticed, that old people, the older generations of farmers, they take photo not very good in terms of technicalities or quality, but they have a very rich stories about the photo they're taking. And for the young people, they have very good technique skill. The photos are beautiful, very focused, but their story is very lacking. So we kind of like make them engage with each other, talk and communicate about what the Subak is. We ask them to first define what Subak is for themselves. And it's very interesting because when they did that, they draw pictures of the Subak and they forget the most important aspect of the Subak, the people. They always draw the mountain, the rice terraces, the water system, the temples, the cows, but they don't draw themselves that, they're an important part of the Subak. And during this process also, it's very interesting because then we get to hear stories from young people and the old generation in particular. We call her Dadong Lisa. She's the oldest one. She's 70 years old. She never hold a camera. And she always feel shy about herself because she didn't go to school. But the photo that she took, it's kind of like it gives her power to voice what she's been dealing, working in a farm as a woman. How it's very difficult to carry the harvest, how it's difficult because the road infrastructure is not very friendly to women, and or the young people who've kind of like, they see the idea of farming, but they're not part of it. So when they present their photos, they often say, oh, this is what we want the farmers to do. And, and then you can see the gap that, okay, you are part of the community, but the way they say it's like they're not part of the community. So and then they begin to see like, who's gonna like continue the Subox system, who's gonna continue this practice in the future, and how we can engage not just between us as a researcher to the community, but also within the community. And through a project, we're just trying to make this communication happen, not only from the young generations and to the older generations, but also from the female and the male participant. Because very often the male participant was like, that's easy, we just carry the harvest. And then the woman would say, no, it's not. You don't know how heavy my burden is because you don't carry the harvest on your head. So we need the road infrastructure. So that communications really help. And I feel like it really empowers them because after certain times, they feel more confident in taking photos and telling stories about the photo they're taking, and then sharing their experience to other participants.
Do you think they're fully engaged now?
Yes. At first, it's very difficult, especially for the women. They always stay quiet, sit in the back, and so let the male farmers to talk more, and the young people will kind of just kind of we call it ignorance and staying away from the discussion. So we're slowly trying to breaking the ice between the participants, make them have a conversation. And then when they kind of present their voices, their stories, and then we ask the participant also to comment on that. And it's kind of it's an interesting learning experience.
All right, thank you. For JB, JB, you mentioned the challenges, some of the challenges you face in engaging with the local community. So, two questions for you. How does the top-down approach affect your work in your area? And are there any instances of negotiation between the research findings that you discover or as a result of your analysis and the community interpretation of the site?
So yeah, the top-down approach. By top-down approach, you mean the involvement of people from outside the community or the government?
Yes, outside the community and the government also.
Okay, so basically we couldn't have done this project without the involvement of the government, because as a foreigner and as a different institution from the government, we had to get the endorsement from them. So this is how it became. We, as an organization, were the one who extended the area of action of the Apsara Authority in the Kulen Mountain. So it was intrinsically linked to our project to arrive in this area and to have the backup of the government. So it was already, this is already a statement. But then the difficulty of the situation is that you have qualified Cambodian people taking decision regarding the communities, which has been basically left alone for decades. So I think it has to be very carefully engaged, the dialogue, and one of the small success we had, I think, was to be a link between the government and the community, because our approach was to be embedded in the village and to stay there by hiring a maximum of local people. First, because there is less turnover in our team, and also because I think you spread better the message if you are working directly with the people in the area. So yeah, as I thought, the link, being the link between the government and advising the government, for example, for the maintenance of the sites, for the conservation of the sites, or for any development project that is actually happening at the moment. In Kulen, we have a new road crossing the whole plateau, and of course this has major consequence on the whole dynamic. People are easily able to travel now, but newcomers are also able to come and to buy lands, which is illegal. More pressure on the natural resources of the park, and so on. So we also act as a link between the government and the population, and take the advices from the two sides and try to make the situation better. Your second question, sorry?
Oh, how do you address if there are any instances of differences in terms of your interpretation and the local community's interpretation?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to say if there is a local. I mean, there is a local interpretation of our findings. That's for sure. But again, the link has to be reinforced, because our interpretation of the archaeological discoveries are and that's one of the weak points of our project. I must confess is that we still need to share more with the local community. I think this was hampered by the fact that they are villagers and it's far from their first consideration. Archaeology is not obviously the first emergency in their life. So you need to create a kind of consciousness of heritage in this population by involving them in any stages of the research, survey, restoration, archaeological excavation, and so on. So by doing so, then you can create a situation where they take awareness. It's a long-term process, and again, it's still ongoing for us.
Have the community declared or started or initiating ownership of the area
of the heritage?
Yeah.
Yes, in some way, yes. They are managed now because of the authority of the Apsara authority. There are 50 guards and workers in charge of the maintenance. So of course this group of people is from the village, is directly interested in gaining some economical benefit from as a guard. But I think by doing so, it creates a dynamic where they take ownership, and by exchanging with the governmental authority and also us as a link, they can really take ownership. The two other examples I would give is the CPA, which is the community protected area. So that's a protected area within the national park where forest is preserved and where local villagers are still able to come and gather non-timber forest product. So this has been going on for 20 years. It's not our initiative, but we work with the CPA members to continue to protect that forest. And we actually set up very recently, and we hope to open it in a couple of weeks, a community-based tourism center, actually in two different villages. And this is also for us a way to catch up with the local community, with the villager, because this center will be a tool for them to make additional income, because tourists will national first because of the situation, and in the future international tourists will come to this place. And the objective is first to get a tool for them to make income, but also to reappropriate this knowledge. And that's where we also act as a link between what we have produced with them, of course, because they were involved in the research. But the analysis was more our team of archaeologists. Now we have to give it back through this center. So it's a long-term process through different channels, as a worker or with this center. But it's happening slowly but surely.
Thank you, JB. Rasmi, you've been working with communities for a long time. How do you sustain their interests? How do you sustain community engagement? And does your work provide any future roles for the community members?
Yeah, like we go back every year, and we live in the village. We stay there. I always have the team live there. So some of my research assistants, live there for 7 years.
Yes.
So we know the people, and we participate in all kind of activity, like ritual activity, any activity that happen in the village. So we have someone, not just like, we just leave. We always kind of like, be there. And if if they want us to do help with anything regarding on the archaeological interpretation or visit the site, we always there. So that's why we still kind of like maintain, our relationship with the people in the village, and also with the local officer there, and we also, work closely with the village school through the, sometimes we give a lecture to the to the school and take the school to the children and teacher to the site as a part of like a local history lesson, something like that. So that what, kind of like happened to us. And also we have local people who work with us as a research assistant, and she just recently got a new job as a school teacher in the village. So she is the main person, that who will kind of like, will be the community leader in terms of transmit our knowledge through the community. It's kind of like, we work with her since she was a small children. She came with us as in our workshop, kind of like school workshop. And after that, she went to the university, but she still saw us working there. And after she graduated, we invite her to be a part of our, team as a research assistant. And then she know more how we operate our work, and she can voice, our kind of like, work to her own community. So that's why we kind of still sustain our kind of like work there and relation with the people. Yeah.
Thank you, Rasmi. Peter, you mentioned earlier that people were more receptive or more engaging when they became aware of sites that were pre-Muslim and pre-Christian. How do you think an engaged scholarship help community heritage conservation and management, especially with these kinds of when they become more aware of their past and when they feel that they are that they're part of a collective history?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, that was a lucky first step that just worked out. But I think I'm still reflecting on what Rasmi said. I'm so jealous of the ability to have people have this long-term presence in a place. But I think ultimately we kind of have to find what community members want out of this process. And it's often not necessarily what we want out of it. And sometimes it even goes against what, I like to preserve things and I don't want things to ever change. And, but people who live in a place, they want change sometimes. Like Weewick's case where, people, they don't want to work in the rice fields. They want to do something else. And so I feel like my training as an archaeologist did not prepare me to ask the right questions, I guess. And that's where I've been puzzling along, trying to figure out how to do this, and learning some things along the way. But really, I think ultimately, it's like we have to ask the right questions and also sit back and really listen to what people are telling us. And that's can be hard to do, I think, at times. And you also have, as Wiebeke has mentioned, a lot of divisions between generations or between genders. And you may not have the same access to all those different groups. And you sometimes have to put more work into getting to listening to, a variety of people. So, yeah, I think in the luckiest cases are when a community's objectives are somewhat related to yours as a researcher or as an archaeologist. Like that, I showed the slide of Sibaltan in Palawan in the Philippines. That was a place where that all started because I co-taught a field school there with Victor Paz Grace's colleague at UP. We just did a 2-week excavation in the town. And we assigned 2 of our students to actually create a museum exhibit in that 2 weeks. It was amazing, rapid response exhibit. While we were excavating things, they were taking them and putting them in this exhibit and writing labels and signs and that kind of thing. After that experience, one of the American students went back the next year and spent almost a year living there. And what people in Sibaltan wanted was they wanted to engage with tourism, which was happening nearby in El Nido, mass tourism, but they wanted it to happen on their own terms, and they wanted it to be about their own heritage. They didn't want people to just come and drink beer on the beach. They wanted people to learn something about their history. And so they started this kind of museum building craze. They've built 2 community museums, and they've built a replica canoe or a boat. They've made these all these activities in town where you can do all these different tourist activities, but they're about community heritage. So it just happened that I think Sibaltan wanted these things at the same time we were there, and our objectives kind of linked up, and we were able to collaborate on these things, but that doesn't always happen. You're muted, Grace, sorry.
Sorry, I want me. Okay, we have 5 minutes before we go to the question and answer, but I want to ask Wiwik and JB if there have been any community-led projects because of your engagement with them. Wiwik first.
Okay. Thanks. So because this new methodology that we use in the community, we just started like last year. So we're still like, in the process of having that research. But I wanted to say that the approach that we're using really gives the power to the community, to the participant, instead of for us, the researchers. We were just there to facilitate the process. We give them the power through the camera in their hand to take photos, to see and to express the concerns and challenges that they face, to discuss it among themselves. And then we kind of like help them, support them when they want to do the exhibitions to related stakeholders that they want to invite, in this case, UNESCO and related government agencies. And it's also interesting because there's a lot of issue that we kind of like we missed at the first place when we kind of like proposed the site to be a World Heritage Site. The idea was we wanted to protect the landscape, but then we don't want to make it like how to say, like a museum, because it's a living culture. People do live there, and like I mentioned, and also Peter said, they changes. And what we're doing there is basically just to help them see the changes that's happening, and then help them adapt to those changes on their own criteria. For example, there are key themes that emerging during this process. They are aware of the landscape changes. They are aware of the increasing tourists that's coming to the site to see their livelihood, to see their landscape. They don't want to stop that, but they want to be involved in that, and they want to have the power to kind of manage the site. Like, where do you want to have a parking lot for tourists? Because there's like 300-400% of increase in like visitors to the area. They want to be the person that tells stories to the tourists, instead of tourists coming into the area with travel agents coming from outside of the area. They want to have more opportunity to market their product. There are requests to help for support for organic farming, for example, from the farmers, and to market their products. So they want to have that access. So I think, I think this kind of, it's an ongoing process. It's a work in progress. What we can do to support them is continue to facilitate. And like Rasmi also mentioned, we involve local community to be the facilitator of this project, so that when it's finished and over, they can still continue doing it with themselves, and and have the ability to voice their concern, and also the ability to kind of manage to make a decision of what they want to do with their community.
Thank you, Wiwik. JB, in your part in Cambodia or in Phnom Penh, community-led projects.
Well, it's starting, but I want to stress something I absolutely agree with Wiwik, is that the fact that you need to give the tools to the community as an advisor, guiding them, and then to let them do the job. The reason is, the objective is not to give ourselves or myself, a full-time job. I consider more myself as a link between some knowledge and another knowledge, or a situation that you want to improve involving this community. So this is quite important. But yes, in our zone, in our area, as I said, the community-based tourism center is something that it didn't came from the community. The will wasn't there. I don't think the idea was there. But it's something that we, as an organization, we anticipated, because we have seen on one other village on the same plateau that tourism can be that can be a threat. Basically, the most visited archaeological site and also environmental site in Kulen is the waterfall. There's a huge waterfall with a big reclining Buddha, which is very famous. There's also a late 12th century temple. And these sites are very visited, but villagers who moved to within these sites were not from Kulen. There were people from outside taking over villagers and taking the business out of them. So we didn't want this bad situation to happen again in the further village we are, the other village we are, because of the extension of the new road. So the idea was to set up that center where tourism can be organized, advised by us, but managed by the villagers. So there's a whole work that we're doing at the moment on training the local guide, training the moto taxi driver, the cook, and so on, which is far from the archaeology, obviously, but it's part of the global approach that we have. In terms of heritage, also, we have to transmit that knowledge that we have built with them over these years of excavation. And this is the training of the local guide mostly, but also I think by having the tourism as an opportunity coming to us pretty soon, we have more leverage to show them how important their heritage is and also their natural environment. Something I briefly mentioned in my introduction, it was the major deforestation of that national park because of a multitude of reasons. I don't have time to go in, but basically the deforestation is mostly happening because of the villagers. It's not something from outside, a large company coming and taking over. It's cashew nut farm expansion over the forested area. So it's very hard to tackle this issue. It's also threatening the archaeological site. So we've been working on this for the last 10 years by zoning, demarcation, and I think one of the last, it's still ongoing. It's still a project. It's not a project. It's an activity, but it's getting there. It's the settlement of tree nurseries in primary schools, and this is not only planting a seed of tree and reforesting area, which is actually happening every year at the rainy season, but it's also planting a seed in the mind of the young people, saying you have to also preserve your natural environment. You have a beautiful rainforest, which is melting away, which is disappearing, and you have to take care of it. So tree nurseries as in primary school are now completely managed by the teachers. We still are here for advising and finding the good location to reforest deforested area. But this is also a good dynamic and a good example, I think, to show that you can transmit things and then they can work by themselves.
Okay, thank you very much, JB. Now we're going to look at the questions from our attendees. I think the first question is for Rasmi. Do you think heritage as a concept is a colonial imposition to local knowledge systems? Oh, Rasmi, you're on mute.
Okay. I think it's part of it, though. It's the way that we use it. I mean, especially in Thailand, it's kind of like the thing that we continue using it, and we cannot deny that. But what is important is if we aware of how the term heritage has been used, and we aware of it, then I think it should be okay. But within the sometimes we call the cultural resource, more than heritage. But so that term will be more kind of like medium. But now I think that people try to use the term heritage, within the Thai context more and more, because it's get more sense of kind of like ownership. It's related due to the ownership of the whatever archaeological site or their culture. So that is what happened in Thailand. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This question, I think, is best for Peter to answer, since you work with several communities, one in Indonesia, one in the Philippines, and one in the US. So the question is, how does the indigenous concept of heritage differ from the Western concept of heritage?
Yeah, I saw that question. It's a great question. I don't have a perfect, easy answer, I don't think. I would also say the Western concept of heritage is, I think, a little different in Europe than it is in the USA. One thing I think Wiewik mentioned, but it runs through all of our talks a little bit, is this idea of living heritage. So I think in the American context, heritage is something you preserve in place, you like freeze it, and it can't ever change. And that has proven to be very problematic. I don't think this is as true in Europe. I think it's tended to be more living landscapes and that kind of, there's change allowed a little bit. So I think that's one factor. I think the other thing is in the American context, we have tended to give less value to things like oral traditions and more value to like science, like archaeology, science, or written documents and that kind of thing. And this is, I think, a very colonialist approach, and it's changing a little bit in the US. I don't see the same problems at least in Indonesia, where things like adat or traditional law are seen as very valid and recognized by the federal government. So yeah, I think every place is a little bit different. I don't know if you can quite define Western versus indigenous that clearly. I think it's more complicated than that. It's certainly worth asking the question though, because we take, concepts of heritage from what we learned and try to apply them in places. And it's often worth really questioning that structure. One big thing is this kind of top down. I think JB talked about this a little bit, but heritage as something, even UNESCO, international, right? This international national body comes into a place and sets a set of rules about what you can do. I don't know if that's a Western tradition or where that comes from, but it seems often to lead to conflict about how you manage places. And I think all of us recognize that there has to be more control at the community level for it to really have sustainable, to work in the long term.
Thank you, Peter. Wiwik, this question is for you. So this participant, this attendee was wondering about the decision to bring Subox to the UNESCO World Heritage. Is it because to protect the land from land conversion or to increase the tourism in Bali? Which one weighs more?
Okay, to be honest, like I mentioned earlier, that the idea of making the Subox landscape as World Heritage Site was basically to protect the landscape and also to kind of like increase the livelihood of farmers, because Bali is almost 90% depending on tourism. But again, when we want to make a site a World Heritage Site, it's like a two sides of a coin. you either protect the site or you destroy the site even more, because of you will definitely going to increase more visitors to the site. So the whole idea of making it a World Heritage Site first was just to protect the area and the livelihood and the culture of the people. But along the way, now we have seen more people are like building more tourism facilities within the site, as happen everywhere in World Heritage Sites around the world. That is one of the challenges that we're facing now. And this is also, I think, a little bit connected to the previous questions, because the term heritage is this concept defined by UNESCO with operational guidelines, and this is how you do governance and the management of the system. But at the same time, the Subox system is a traditional system, which is, it runs based on the water course. So you have the forest, you have the rivers, and then you have the rice terraces and the villages. But now, if you can see in the modern structures of governance, these areas are divided in different districts. So the managements are kind of like overlapping within each other. Like the site that I'm working now, which is part of the largest cluster in the cultural landscape in Bali, the forest, the lakes are located in different districts. So the water sources are run by different governance system, and the farmers are on the other side of the district. So it's kind of like overlapping. How can we protect and manage the system if we don't return the power to the community? Because I think they're the one that knows best how to control the area. So at the moment, tourism gave a lot of economic benefits to the island, and the government kind of like focusing on how you kind of increase your income by facilitating this tourism development within the area. And this process, I think, that needs to be communicated with local people, because they're the one who owns and manage the area, how they want to, say, open their area for visitor, how they want to manage the area. So yeah, it's kind of like it is being protected. The farmers feeling proud that they are part of the World Heritage Sites. They're aware of their culture now. Not that they weren't before, but they feel like the proudness are there because they're being recognized internationally. But also at the same time, it increased tourism visitors and land conversions in the area. So yeah, it's like two sides of a coin, and then that's kind of like the work that we need to continue doing to balance them at least.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Wiwik. Okay. This one's for JV. How do you respond to or approach situations where community-based projects promote exclusivist forms of identity or ownership over sites?
I'm not sure to understand perfectly the question.
Okay. How do you respond when community-based projects promote a specific identity or ownership of sites? For example, if a community wants to claim that one religious group or ethnic group has a control or right over the site and the narratives of the site.
I'm not sure it has happened yet in our situation, but what I would do is that I wouldn't tame them, or how to say, I wouldn't say they shouldn't do that. I think we should encourage any activity, any action which is empowering the communities or the villagers, because the top-down approach, as Peter said, is not always the best. These people have a word, have a knowledge, even though it's not always, it's not academic, but it's very valuable as well. So it has to be encouraged, but we can give advice, we can be the link, and combining our knowledge, our academic knowledge, or just recent technology such as using drone mapping, or just GIS technology or stuff like that. We are able to bring tools to them to show them, hey, if you take ownership of this area, this is how it looks like from the sky. Just being links between those villagers, those communities, and their approach, or their project, if they have one.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, JB. Maybe Peter can also answer. If one community decides that they want to claim or control the narratives about the site.
Yeah, that's, I haven't actually had that experience directly, at least at that level, but I've certainly had, different people within a community making statements. I mean, like in Indonesia and East Timor, to a certain degree, there's a certain, like, older men kind of own history in many of these places, especially where there's not a lot of written sources to draw from. So the knowledge of the stories of the past is the property of older men, and that's also partly the source of their power. And so when I work with high school kids who start to learn about these histories, it actually, in many ways, destabilizes that system a little bit. So it's not exactly your question, I think, but I think it is important to recognize as outsiders coming into a community that things we do have an impact, sometimes unexpected ones, and sometimes we have no control over what to do with that, right? So I may think that, it's great to empower the youth to take ownership of history, but actually there's all kinds of fall-on effects that might come out of that, where do we actually want to reduce the power of elders in a community? That's a very important stabilizing force in small communities. So I think it's almost like you're playing with fire, and you have to be cognizant of the things that you do are making an impact, whether you have control over it or not. And most of the times you don't.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Peter. So we
Grace,
have.
can I share, my my thought on this? Yeah.
Sure.
I have a case that I think that the people take their own narrative in terms of about the archaeological site. For instance, the site that I work is the cemetery. It's the log coffin. So when we share our information, we say that, okay, this is the multiple burial, within one coffin. And the coffin is the size of the coffin is ranged between 5 meters to 11 meters. So the local will, some of elder will say that no, it's not true. It's not not many people, and the size of the people should be like the same size as the coffin. So it's very tall, So the ancient people have to be very tall, so they can lay down in the coffin. And, so that is what they believe. And they call the coffin is P-man or spirit, spirit. That means that people who have P-man is very tall, spirit. And it is local people. And this is what they believe. I think it is okay if they have their own voice, in terms of interpretation of the archaeological or heritage.
Yes.
Yeah, and yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rasmi. Thank you to all our panelists. And as a way to end this panel, I'd like to ask to ask each panelist to perhaps give advice or what should be the best, what should we follow? What are the best practices in engaging with the community? Let's start with Wiwik.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if I can give advice, but I can share from my experience that it is very important to engage directly with the community, because it gives the platform for people usually that have no opportunity or less opportunity to voice their concern and challenges. And in many cases, we often forget about that. So yeah, and we also need to be aware that community changes, and those changes we need to ask back to the community, like how many percentage changes they want to accept and how they adapt to those changes, and an open opportunity not only to voice their concern, but also to have a discussion among themselves about the solution for all those challenges or problems that they're having. We just have to remind them that they have power, and we often forget that. We often think like when we go to the Subox, for example, and then we talk to them and their first question would be like, okay, so what's the solution? And we just sometimes need to remind them, like, we came here just to study from you, to learn from you, instead of us teaching you guys. So yeah, so I think giving them more opportunities to voice their perspective, that would be great. Thank
you, Wiwik. From JB, any advice on best practices?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, I totally agree with Wiwik. I would add something maybe else that, but maybe it's more natural for you as you are from Bali. I'm still a foreigner in Cambodia, even after 21 years, and I will still be. But I think one of the main advice I would give is to be, as much as you can, as to be involved and based and embedded into the local communities. So you live with them, you understand what's the rhythm, you understand their issues, the way they work, the way they harvest, and so on along the year. You understand, of course, the culture. You listen, you consider what they say. That might sometimes not be, you might not agree with that in some cases, but you have to consider and ask yourself why you don't agree with that, and consider the knowledge and the changes that they want, and then turn this into actions which are benefiting these people, but also fitting with what you believe is good. So it might be quite objective, subjective, but I think the way to make it more subjective is actually to have this exchange with this community.
All right, thank you, JB. Peter, any advice on best practices?
Well, just to echo what's already been said, and something I think Rosmi might have said this earlier about the importance of having good partners. I've found, like Rosmi, having people who are committed to the same engagement processes helping me, maybe from just different disciplines or different kinds of expertise, has really been a game changer for me and allowed me to do, kind of focus on what I'm good at and work with other people. And it just increases the level of engagement that you can manage, having good partners like that. And sometimes they're from the local community or they may not be. And as someone, unlike I think my 3 co-panelists here, I'm not based in Southeast Asia. So my challenge is always, how do I do this from a distance during short visits? I go back after a year and everything's changed. So I don't, that's very difficult, I think. I wish I could be based more closely with the communities I work in, but I think there's still things you can do as a long distance scholar. And finally, I guess, I think JB kind of alluded to this, but there's I think a level of commitment. I'm just committed to this. I love it. I get a lot out of working with communities. It makes my work pleasurable and exciting and fun. And I think that that kind of joy that you get out of doing this community work is keeps you going through the difficult times.
Thank you, Peter. And last but not the least, Rasmi.
Thank you. All the panelists already kind of like say something, that is similar. My case is very similar. But I would think that the most important thing that you have to like Peter said, commit to the community that you work with, and you have to have a kind of like long-term engagement with people. JB just said, and Vivek, it's not simply happen quickly. You have to show them how committed you are, and they trust you, and then that can be a lifelong and sustainable in the future. And also when you work, it's always a two-way relationship, and or engagement, or even the communication. I never say that I will work with them, but I always, now I say that I'm learning from them on every aspect. I put archaeology along the side first, and then learn about their community, learn about their local history first. And then the strategy that I use it to work with them is like I use can be kind of like useful for their practice. Say something like, we survey a lot of cave, and we mentioned to them that cave is the source for the water. During the irrigation or the environmental change, we can notice it from the cave, the water level, something like that. So archaeology, I talk about archaeology, but it's applied archaeology that it can be useful for the community as well. I share all of the knowledge about the like viewing, the loom that we found, and very similar to the modern community. So when they saw something like that, they can connect it with us. So it's something that we have to think about, like the way that we can communicate, with them, and sharing our experience with them. And then, you get the kind of like a more sustainable in terms of make the sense of belonging. And they feel that, this is belong to them. And before they want to change it to the tourist destination, they want to make sure, in case of the community that I work with, they want to make sure that it's all protected, the site all protected, and we have enough knowledge before open. And they also know how to, take care of the site.
Thank you
So
very
that's
much,
all.
Rasmi. Thank you to
Yeah.
all our panelists. Thank you to the sponsors and organizers. And I believe that there is a link on the chat box regarding if you want an e-certificate, please fill out the form. And then there are also links to the works of our panelists. And you're also invited to the next panel, panel 6 next week. And the information is on the UCLA website. Thank you very much. And this ends panel 5. And we all hope to see you again next week. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Grace. For to those interested, the papers by JB, Peter, and Vivek are part of a Routledge volume on community engaged research that we hope will be out in the next 6 months. And I think Jan Rasmi is familiar with that proposal. So thank you all. This presentation is really a testament to the great investment and commitment of, uh, of these panelists, and of course Grace. Um, your investment and commitment in getting the community that you work with to engage in what you do is exceptional. The response of the communities to own their heritage is again, a testament to the importance of your advocacy. I know as an academic and someone who also does heritage and archaeological work, this kind of investment is not really credited in our promotion and tenure. It's changing, as Peter mentioned, but it needs to be institutionalized. And also, there's not a lot of funding available for us to do this kind of work. So we really have to look for people or agencies that are willing to invest in this kind of research, as JB is familiar with, as his work needs a lot of funding from donors. But anyway, I think this panel uh, illustrates that Southeast Asian archaeology is heading into the right and engaging directions, engaging the community, getting them involved involves a lot of investment on our part and investment on the community. But in the end, engagement, empowerment results in a more meaningful work. We don't just jump in, leave, and then write papers and then get tenure and be full professors. We need to work with communities and also give back to the communities that you work with. So evaluations are, the links are for the evaluation and e-certificates are on the chat box, and we invite you for panel 6 scheduled next week, same time, and we're going to focus on Pacific histories. uh, I think more archaeological and heritage conservation presentations next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to see you.
Thank you, everyone.